From the Wye Valley to the coast of Pembroke, I have just spent the last 2 weeks rambling across the entirety of South Wales, on an adventure to seek out some of Wales's most hidden historical relics and unknown medieval castles. On my adventure, I have travelled through fields, forests and mountain passes, in glorious sun and drenching rain. I have met some friends along the way and sought refuge in many fine pubs. So join me as we explore the great outdoors together on the Big South Wales Historical Ramble.
Sensing eyes looking at me, staring like I'm an unsolved mystery, just living life behind a blocked out door.
We certainly have a lot of miles to cover today. Before we take on a large portion of the hike, we stop off at a familiar site just west of Chepstow. These are the walls of the fortified Roman town of Caerwent. Usk is believed to be the first Roman settlement in the area following the invasion of the 1st century AD, but the ground where the fort was situated on were liable to flooding, so a new palisade settlement was built here, and by 300 AD, the town was fully enclosed in tall stone walls complete with multiple gatehouses. Before the Romans, an Iron Age tribe lived here by the name of the Silures. Once the Roman war machine had defeated the people of this tribe, they repeated what they had done with the Iceni over in Norfolk, and built a new, heavily Romanised market town for the Welsh tribe in an attempt to Romanise them and prevent diplomatic or cultural frictions in the future. Within Caerwent, a large amount of stone foundations have been unearthed, which gives us a key insight into the typical locations of buildings within a Roman settlement. We have residential houses and shops hugging either side of the main road, which cuts through the centre of town from east to west. And in the middle we have a basilica, or forum, a centre for trade, finance and administration. The basilica was a giant 2 or perhaps 3-storey building with many rooms and corridors, with the one at Caerwent certainly being at least 2 stories high as the thick stone walls suggest. We even have the bases of plinths, on top of which tall decorated columns and statues would sit, either supporting a large ornate roof or standing as a memorial centrepiece overlooking the Forum Market Square. Although I'm unsure whether this is original Roman paving and guttering in situ, regardless it is a beautiful representation of domestication, order and civilization that the Romans offered the people of Wales upon their occupation in the 1st century AD. Not to say that the Welsh weren't civilized already, but there is no doubt that the Romans brought a level of quality to life that had never been before experienced by the British people. Just across the way from the basilica ruins lays the unearthed foundations of a Roman temple. Despite temples being very common in the Roman period, with probably as many Roman temples as there are churches in Britain today, they are incredibly rare for 2 reasons. Firstly, the temples built inside of towns and cities were often placed in the centre, which would go on to see considerable development over the ages. So the Anglo-Saxons who came here after the Romans would have torn these down and replaced them with Christian chapels once Christianity had re-established itself within the Saxon communities by the 7th century AD. And secondly, many Roman temples were placed far out into the countryside on long roads connecting settlements together, so that they could provide a stopping point for travellers and soldiers on the march. Due to this and the fact that Roman temples were often small square structures, they are notoriously rare and difficult to locate for archaeologists today. So, to find the undisturbed foundations of this Roman temple still in situ here at Caerwent is a remarkable find, and makes us wonder how long it continued to stand here before finally getting demolished so only the foundations remained. One feature of Caerwent that may look somewhat out of place is this suspiciously familiar earthen mound in the southeast corner of the town. This is in fact not Roman at all, but as you may have guessed, it is a Norman motte, on top of which a castle keep would have sat. When the Normans arrived here 1,000 years later, they rebuilt some of the now decaying Roman walls of Caerwent and built this castle mound in the corner to defend it. The town grounds marked out by their Roman predecessors were much too big for a Norman community at this time in the 11th century. So the new occupiers effectively cut the town in half and only used half of the space for their new settlement, with the medieval church marking the western end of the town. This is why the northern side of the Roman walls are all but gone today, as the stone was extensively quarried and used to construct buildings in the southern half, leaving only the earth ditch and small remnants of walls surviving today in the north. The location of Caerwen is also logistically vital, as it is on the Roman road between the city of Gloucester, known then as Colonia Nervia Glaventium, as well as a fort at Cardiff, and one other site which we'll be visiting next.
In my mind.
It is now midday, which means that the pubs are open. Reinvigorated with a fresh pint, I continue west towards my second Roman site of the day, which houses not one, not two, but 3 historical sites all next door to each other. This is Caerleon, a small town of Roman origin. This settlement helped write the books on the Roman occupation of Wales, as so many game-changing excavations had been unearthed here since the 1900s. First, to get a scale of what we are dealing with, I visited the Museum of Caerleon to gain an understanding of the excavations that took place here, and how exactly it helped us understand what South Wales was like during the Roman period. The museum is free and hosts a wide range of Roman artefacts from amphora, crockery, tombstones, and my personal favourite, an intact Roman helmet. I particularly enjoyed the life-size mannequins in varying military dress. Luckily, I had witnessed the Ermine Street Guard Roman reenactment group performing at Flag Fen in Peterborough earlier on in the year, so it was nice to see these ranks of Roman army in the flesh. But I had a very busy day ahead of me, so I set off to the first of the 3 sites. First, in the southwest corner of Caerleon, stands the foundationary remains of the original Roman barracks quarters. This section of architecture provides the rare opportunity to see the typical layout of a Roman soldier's living and sleeping area. The museum has a reconstruction of such a living space, where between 4 to 8 people would sleep, with an adjoined room which would have had a kitchen and storage space. All Roman soldiers were expected to cook their own meals and look after themselves, so these were often seen as social things that the group of soldiers would do together. The barracks blocks of Caerleon are also the only Roman barracks excavated in Britain as of 2024. Although the large stone fortifications surrounding the barracks are now long gone, again likely used to build various houses and farm buildings over the centuries that followed the fall of the Roman occupation here in Wales, we can still clearly see the prominent earth banks that protected the site. Not far away, in Cardiff, a Victorian architect by the name of William Burgess rebuilt the walls of a Roman fortress, which is now Cardiff Castle. He stayed true to the authentic Roman style, so these help us reimagine what the fortifications of both Caerleon and Caerwent may have looked like in their prime. A few minutes from the barracks blocks stands the impressive remains of an amphitheatre. This is the best preserved Roman amphitheatre in Britain, and would have been a hive of sound and excitement for the Roman people who lived here at Caerleon. What we see today is just the ground floor, with its many entrances between the sitting areas, which would have had wooden seating areas going high up into the rafters, similar to modern bleachers. The amphitheatre also wouldn't have been a solitary building. Multiple shops selling fast food, souvenirs, clothing and toys would have all surrounded the amphitheatre. The building itself would host gladiatorial fights, theatre productions, dramatics and comedy shows. Keeping the soldiers happy and morale high was very important for the Roman army, so multiple venues for entertainment were created to uphold the values of the Roman military. No more is this true than my next and final historic site of Caerleon. Here we have the incredible remains of the Roman bathhouse. This was essentially a public swimming pool, initially reserved for the soldiers to use, but was likely open to the general public later on as well. The long rectangular remains you see before you was the outdoor swimming pool, or Lido, where people would swim in cold water for sport, to cool off, or simply for fun. The plaza where the Lido is situated would have likely featured a running track, outdoors gym, and a garden. Nearby are the ruins of the indoors part of the bathhouse, with multiple circular baths for both cool and heated water. Here the people would relax, socialise and cool off after using the running track or the Lido. The bathhouse was heated in much of the same way as the higher end houses were back in Caerwent, by the use of underfloor heating named a hypocaust. These were essentially a complex of tunnels in which hot air was pumped through by a team of staff working around the clock tending to several fires to keep a steady temperature around the building. As much as I wanted to stay and imagine what Roman life was like here in Caerleon, I had to continue on my ramble, as I still had 2 more places of historical importance to visit before this portion of my journey was over.
Feeling a little bit better, now I have you. Do you know Mrs. Potter? I'm really glad now that I've got her. Feeling on top of the world, now I have you. Now I have you. Now I have you. Now I've got you. Now I've got you. They try so hard, but I just walk away. And they say I'm for
Caerphilly Castle. The largest castle in all of Wales, and a formidable fortress of the medieval period. Inside the outer bailey there are 4 examples of siegecraft during the Middle Ages, including a Perrier, 2 versions of a trebuchet, and a ballista. I will be discussing these at length in a future video. Today I wanted to highlight 2 fascinating features of Caerphilly. This castle has a section of reconstructed hoardings, which are essentially a wooden corridor which overhangs the castle walls. These provided excellent defence for 2 main reasons. Firstly, the addition of hoardings meant that the walls were almost impossible to escalate with the use of siege ladders or a siege tower, and they also provided an additional vantage point for the defenders, who now had the ability to shoot down at the incoming attackers from different angles. Hoardings were very common in medieval castle building and are often featured in contemporary manuscripts. Of course, as they were built of timber, they didn't survive to the modern day. So for Caerphilly to feature reconstructed hoardings like this gives us a key insight into a component of medieval castle defence that are often overlooked and underappreciated. On a similar note, Caerphilly is currently undergoing a major reconstruction project which aims to reimagine the Great Hall to its former grandeur. This project will see a revamp of the medieval hall, showing off a splendour of colours through painted walls, tapestries and ornaments. In one of the towers, a room has been semi-reconstructed in an attempt to show what typical medieval castle chambers could look like. However, of course, there would have been much more decoration to make it fully authentic, including painted walls, painted fireplaces, much more furniture, and of course a lot of artwork and personal belongings. Reconstruction projects like this are incredibly important to maintain our heritage, as if you're like me, history may inspire you more if it is visual. Seeing and experiencing how people lived during the medieval period helps us understand their lives so much more than just reading from pages in history books. I am very excited to see how this project unfolds, and will certainly be returning once it is complete.
So remember when you tried to take control. Brackendale's built into my heart and my soul.
well, you can't always have sunny blue skies. Welcome to Coity Castle, our final stop-off point for today's adventure. Just west of Cardiff stands this medieval castle near Bridgend. What we see today is a mismatch of ruins dating largely from the 13th to the 16th centuries, but the castle has its roots in the 11th century. It is understood that Coity began life as a ringwork castle, a rather rare form of Motte and Bailey castle where the entire castle was built on an earth mound, sometimes with multiple rings of earthwork surrounding it, not too dissimilar from Iron Age hill forts built 1,000 years earlier. By the 12th century, the Normans had built a rectangular stone keep and replaced the wooden palisades with stone walls. The castle then underwent considerable reconstruction in the 14th century, where a range was built besides the inner gatehouse. Much of this building survives today and was primarily built as a kitchen, bakery and storeroom. However, living quarters and a vault was also constructed in the building. At the beginning of the 15th century, the castle came under siege by none other than Owain Glyndwr, the leader of the Welsh uprising who had attempted to push the English out of Wales. Despite Glyndwr's powerful army and immense following, Coity stood against the rebellion and the siege was eventually lifted. Over the 1400s, further extensions on both the range and the keep saw the castle grow into a spectacular fortress on top of a hill overlooking the town. Both a defensive structure as well as an ornate home, Coity Castle would have been an impressive example of medieval architecture in Wales. Curiously, in 1584, the Gamage family who owned the castle married into the Sidney family and lived on their estate in Penshurst in Kent, leaving Coity with no official occupiers and seemingly no future plans to do so. The castle, of course, then gradually fell into disrepair, and after centuries of decay, it was saved by Cadw, who continue to look after it to this day. Coity Castle marks the end of today's adventure. Join me next time as I continue my venture across the entirety of South Wales, from the Wye Valley to Pembrokeshire. In the next episode, I will be taking on the Gower, a landscape filled with picturesque beaches, farms, and many fine castles.
Such a good friend, life at times can be like a dead end, remember being free once again.